Welcome to the Transition Drill Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Pantiani. I appreciate you taking the time to watch. So let's get into this. Where'd you grow up?
So I grew up in Columbia, South Carolina.
Okay.
So I'm a South Carolina guy. Was born and raised in Columbia in a little town in the northwest called Urso. So after I graduated high school, I went to several different colleges and was really just biding my time till I could become a police officer. I mean, that was all I ever wanted to do. So,
is there law enforcement in your family?
There's actually not. No, I was the first one. There was some military. Never really had a desire to go into the military when I was young. Just always wanted to be all middle school all the way through high school. All I ever wanted to be, and even going into college, was to be a police officer.
What do you think was the draw to it?
The excitement, probably. Just the idea of driving fast and car chases and, kind of I grew up in that age of the Cops TV show where everything was kind of made very dramatized and, looked like a really cool and fun thing to do.
The 1% of the actual job that they showed on TV.
It's funny, they never showed the 3 a.m. and the radio hasn't cracked in 4 hours and everybody's asleep behind a building. That part they never showed.
Or spending the 4 hours writing the report for the 15-minute incident.
Yeah, for the 15-minute incident that gets red inked by your sergeant and your lieutenant or whoever, and you have to go back and start it all over and write it again. And that part was never shown. It was always the excitement. But as you know, it's 1% excitement and 99% boredom.
Exactly. So coming out of high school, went into college right away?
I did. I went straight into college. I got asked to not come back to a few of them, and I'd get my act together and transfer to a new one. And but I mean, I graduated high school at 18, and I had to get to 21, so I filled those years.
And going to college, were you leaning towards, even though you were leaning towards law enforcement, what were you focusing on as far as education?
So I started off as a sociology major. Why, I don't know. Couldn't tell you. And then that was at one college, and then I transferred. I got asked to not come back, and then kind of got my grades up, and then I kind of focused on criminal justice for a while, and then I actually got really interested in computers. And so I studied computers for a little bit, but it was all just a waste of time and money and just biding time.
So ultimately, none of that ever deviated your desire to be a police officer?
Oh, absolutely not. No. So, I mean, I was actually I guess it probably started in middle school, was in cadet programs all the way through till I was 21.
Was there something specific that really kind of cemented the law enforcement aspect or the desire to be a cop?
No, I don't think so. It just seemed really cool. The guys that I looked up to in my community were police officers. They led exciting lives, or at least from my standpoint. They went to the midnight movies and,
right.
They carried guns and, they were just usually telling fun stories about doing something. And it was just very attractive.
So when did you get hired as a cop? What year are we talking about?
1994.
And how old are you?
21.
Okay. So as soon as you were eligible to be a police officer, you became a police officer.
Yes, sir.
And how long were you a cop?
All in about 5.5 years.
And going in, though, you were planning to do a career.
Planning to do a career, absolutely, yeah.
And how soon after you were in it did the luster start wearing off?
About halfway. So I started off with a department in Charleston, and then transitioned up to a department in the upstate of South Carolina called in the city of Spartanburg. And it was funny because I went through all the academy and went through my field training and kind of got, okay, you're going on, you're out on your own. And man, I showed up for I wanted to be on third shift. That was my goal. And I showed up my first day all, pressed and starched and, shiny badge and nameplate, and walked in, and my lieutenant at the time was sitting behind his desk smoking a cigarette, and he had nothing on his shirt, nothing. And he had this like small, like little hat, like a badge that you put on your hat. That's what he wore on his chest. And I walked in and he started laughing. He was like, "You need to take all that crap off." He said, "Nothing that shines, nothing that's shiny, nothing that would make noise, all that crap on your belt, get rid of it,
Get rid of the stuff that looks good in a picture."
Absolutely. And so, which I did. I mean, I was always very clean, I believed in that. And so as we started kind of working through, I started meeting the guys on my team, the guys that had been there for 15 years or 10 years or 12 years, or, that were halfway through their career and they had their time in and they were just miserable. They had too much time in to leave, or they had family obligations, or they needed the insurance, or, I think probably the most common theme of that is they felt stuck, and, they didn't complain. I mean, they did their job, but they weren't excited either. And I remember one of the guys that I worked on shift with, we had a conversation one night and he kind of voiced some of those, and he kind of jokingly made a comment, don't ever get into a position where you're stuck. It's a terrible feeling. And that kind of rang true. And so it kind of stuck in my head for a while. And that's kind of what led me to.
Now you switched departments.
I did.
How long were about equal time at both of them? Or?
No. So I was with the first department for about 9 months. And the second department, I knew a gentleman that worked there, and we had a phone conversation, and they were hiring and they were paying an extra, I think it was an extra $9,000 a year. And so they offered me a job. And as a 21-year-old kid, I mean, I went from 16,008 was my first paying job. And when I went up to Spartanburg, they were paying 24,900. So whatever that, I mean, that was a
significant jump.
I mean, that's a significant jump, I mean, it's still a horrendous amount of money, to live on, but it was a very high, I mean, it was a significant jump in income.
Agency wise, what both of them kind of the same, or? They
were. So, I mean, the locations were different, the Charleston, it wasn't Charleston, it was Mount Pleasant. That department was a very affluent area. It's a very wealthy section of the state. And the city of Spartanburg was kind of the polar opposite. Not very affluent, very blue collar. There were 22 government subsidized housing projects inside the city. So it was a different style of community. And obviously some different problems and different challenges.
Got it. So when you starting to think about making your transition,
mm-hmm.
You said about midway through is when you really, for no better term, the light kind of came on that maybe this wasn't working for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of my personal downfalls was coming into it. I saw excitement and wanted to make a difference. And, I think a lot of the things that police officers do or they want whenever they get into it, they want to help people. And I firmly believe that 99% of police officers become that because they want to make their community better. They really want to help people. And it doesn't take long, or at least it didn't for me, to kind of realize, well, maybe these people don't want help. You can only get cussed at so many times before you finally like, well, I'm trying to help you. But I was also a little immature. I mean, I was, 22, 23 years old. I mean, that's a grown man, but you're still maturity wise still kind of lacking. And, it's possible my expectations were wrong, or the goals were not achievable, or whatever the way you can put that. But, it didn't take long for me to kind of realize this is not what I thought it was going to be.
And in hindsight, it'd probably be real easy to say if you'd have done a little bit more research, maybe you would have seen the bigger picture. Or do you think that because you were so interested in being a police officer, you kind of ignored the periphery of the picture?
I think I just ignored the periphery. I think I went in, for me personally, I think I went into it. I think I had as good of an idea of what it was really about So like I said, I was a cadet with, there's a town where I'm from called Urso. They had a cadet program that I was with, and we used to go and ride, and, so I knew, that it was mostly boring. But the camaraderie and the friendships was, very attractive to me as well. I mean, the guys you work on shift with, you become very close with. And then after I left the Urso Police Department, I was actually a cadet with the Highway Patrol, South Carolina Highway Patrol, for several years. In the traffic aspect of it, I liked that a lot. The Highway Patrol had a team called the ACE team, which was a drug interdiction team, a highway drug interdiction team. And I really, really liked that a lot. And kind of had ambitions of kind of doing that type of work.
Did you ever consider going to the Highway Patrol?
I tried. Yeah, I tried one time and they didn't hire me. So it didn't work out. Hey,
at least you tried.
Yeah, I mean, I tried. So I don't really know why, but I guess I wasn't what they were looking for. But at the time, I was pretty upset about it. Hindsight was the best thing that ever happened. Could have not led me to where I am now, and which is in a really great place. So, I think, kind of going back, I think I had all the tools to really see what it was. I just don't think I was personally mature enough to really accept all the different things, that law enforcement really is in terms of the challenges that come along with the position.
But at the same token, though, as much as you say maybe you weren't as much, I don't want to say the job needed you to be mature, but you were mature enough to at least see that this wasn't working for you, as opposed to trying to force that square peg into that round hole.
Yeah, absolutely. I was, and you're exactly correct. I mean, I was definitely mature enough to be able to go, this is not what I wanted. I was able to do a lot of the things that I was able to achieve, a lot of the goals that I had set out for myself early on in life. I wanted to work on a drug interdiction team, and I got to do that. I wanted to get to the point where I had all of those tools that those interdiction guys had, whether it's interviewing and different interviewing techniques, different reading body language, body kinetics. I wanted to have a canine. I wanted to have a drug dog, and I ended up working a drug dog. So I was able to achieve a lot of those things. And one thing that I learned is that as I was achieving those goals, they were not nearly as fulfilling as I expected them to be. Now, is that because I had put them on too high of a pedestal? Maybe. Or maybe it just wasn't really what I was called to do.
So almost with each advancement in your career, instead of drawing you more into law enforcement,
it actually
pushing you away.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you decide, let me go backwards a little bit. How long did you keep working in the job when you realized this really isn't for me? Was it a quick process or a slow process to make the decision to leave?
It was a slow process. So, I realized that I needed a change. And so I ended up going to night school and getting my real estate license, and started doing some real estate appraising and brokerage kind of on my days off. So we were working the 12-hour shifts. So, you're really only working 15 days a month, or, half day, or a half the month. So you had a lot of free time to go and do other things. So I started working in real estate part-time, and that transition lasted probably about a year from the time I started that to the point where I almost transitioned and went from law enforcement full-time and real estate part-time. And then those switched to where all of a sudden real estate was full-time and law enforcement was part-time.
Did you have a mentor in the real estate game?
I did, yeah. So I had a family member, my father, so it was a little bit easier. But it was also kind of a natural transition at the time.
How was that for you, though, in the sense of, were you seeing that as, this is my fit, this is where I want to stay, or was that even something that didn't really
That was in the 98, 99 was kind of when that transition happened. So it was at the time it was kind of, this is just an opportunity to get me out of law enforcement. You know, I saw the writing on the walls. You know, I still believed in what I was doing, but I personally got the feeling where I had done what I felt like I was able to do. You know, that I could see and feel that the end was near. You know, that I was not reaching to a point where I was going to be negative. I don't mean it that way, but you know, I had done what I felt like I was capable of doing and achieving, and that, you know, there was really nothing else that I felt like I could do.
For you, the ride was over. It was time to get off.
It was right. Absolutely. It's a great way to put it.
So how many years were you in real estate?
About 10. So I worked in real estate during the buildup of the housing market, and which eventually crashed in 2008. So I rode that during that time. And I'd love to tell you that there's some romantic story behind that, but we were all making money and it was easy. So it just kind of became what it was.
When you made the decision to leave law enforcement, was there any regret behind it?
No. Actually, so that's actually an interesting story, because I was really struggling with wanting to get up and go to work. I remember one night I had a car stopped, and, you know, all this safety, you know, you never search a car by yourself ever. You know, I mean, that's just rule. And
they kind of stress that in the academy.
It's kind of important. And it's even more important because there was a guy that I know with the South Carolina Highway Patrol. His name was Mark. I just drew a blank on his name. He searched a car. He was on the A's team, searched a car down on the I-26 state line, and was shot and killed. And he was from where I grew up. And so that was always a really big thing with me. And so I ended up stopping a car one night, late 1999, and the guy had drugs on him. He had just come from buying, and so I found it on him, and he was standing there, and I was searching his car by myself. And I remember I was leaned over in his car, and he's like walking up, standing over me. And I didn't know, because I was, you know, not mentally and tactically aware. And I saw it a couple of days later when I went back and looked at the tape. And I remember that hit me like a ton of bricks. It was like, whoa, you know, this is a problem. You know, I'm going to get hurt. Or more importantly, somebody else is going to get hurt, and that's not acceptable. And so right after that, we were going into Y2K. So, you know, 1999, New Year's Eve into 2000. And I was scheduled to go to an island in the Bahamas for New Year's Eve. It was an island called Bimini. So it's a little island off the coast of Fort Lauderdale. It's an amazing place. And so my parents and I were going to fly over several days early before this group was going to join us. And we flew over, and my parents ended up getting the flu. I did not, for some reason, because we were riding in a van together and stayed in the same hotel in Florida together. And so we flew over, and then the very next morning, my parents flew back and drove back to Columbia. And so I ended up on this island basically by myself for 2 or 3 days before any other friends, you know, people that I knew joined us. And it was just the most amazing. It was probably the 2 or 3 best days at that point I'd ever had in my life. You know, I went kayaking, and I just kind of unplugged from the world. Ended up meeting a couple of girls from Canada, and we had a really good time together, and just had an amazing time. And I came back from that going, this is over. And so the transition in law enforcement was slow until that moment. And as soon as I came back, I walked in, I turned in everything, and I walked away and never looked back.
And no regrets since?
No regret. I didn't carry a gun I didn't touch a gun for 5 years after that. I wanted to have nothing to do with it.
Now, the real estate market, obviously, or the real estate industry is so up and down.
It is.
Going into that and then getting into it for several years, what drew you away from the real estate industry?
So I was, the real estate industry is hard. At the time it was easy. There's a great movie called The Big Short. If you really want to know what happened in the banking crisis of the mid 2000s, there's a movie that Brad Pitt wrote and produced and actually financed himself called The Big Short, and it's got a great cast in it, and it's very accurate about what led up to that financial crash. But at the time when that happened, I was married at that time, and I had 2 children, and we were living well, but we were very heavily mortgaged, and
like everybody else was.
And luckily we kind of saw. My dad saw it coming years before and kept on warning, but I didn't listen. But we kind of saw the writing on the walls a little bit before everybody went into foreclosure, and we were able to sell off most everything, but we still lost everything. And so we ended up moving from Columbia to Las Vegas, and got a job out there, just kind of wanted a fresh start, and got a job working still in real estate, but not really wanting to be in real estate, wanting to go a different route. And that's where cooking kind of came in, which was always a big passion. We're an Italian family. We cook a lot. And so I ended up going out to eat one night at a restaurant in Vegas. It was an Italian restaurant called Ferraro's, and it was just the most amazing food. And I remember going home after that dinner going, that's me. That's what I want to do.
Had you had any, other than home cooking, any experience with cooking prior to that?
In college I cooked at like Outback, but none really.
Nothing that you thought would ever drive you towards a career? No. You mentioned being married once you were in real estate. Were you married while you were a police officer?
No, I wasn't. I was single during all that. So I didn't meet my wife. We're divorced now, but I didn't meet her until after I was out of law enforcement.
So that didn't have a bearing on your decision to leave? No,
not at all. That was purely me.
So you're in Vegas. What year are we talking about now?
That would have been 2010. So I moved there in 2010.
And made the decision, you're going to leave the real estate industry. You're going to go towards the culinary industry.
Yeah, so I knew that's the way I wanted to go. And I went and tried to get accepted to one of the culinary schools. The one in Vegas, there was an Art Institute, which is now out of business, and a Le Cordon Bleu, which is now out of business. And the program was long. So I went and met with them and tried to, see what the process was to go through. Meanwhile, I had gone back to the restaurant, Ferraro's, and tried to ask him if I could get a job. And I remember walking in and asking to see the chef. And a few minutes later, he comes out, and it's this kind of short Italian guy. Very he's just the greatest dude. But when he walks out, he's very Italian and very he has a very powerful presence. And so we sat down. I was like, I had dinner here the other night, and I want to come work for you. And he started laughing. He was like, "Why?" I said, "That's what I want to do." And so he was like, "Look, do you have any experience?" And I was like, "No, none."
I know how to eat food.
Yeah, I know how to cook like my grandmother cooks. And so he just very politely was like, "Look, the guys on my line have been cooking for 20 years. You have nothing to offer." And I was like, "But you don't understand. I want to work here." And he's like, "I have nothing for you. Sorry. No." And so I said, "Thank you." And I grabbed one of his cards on the way out the door, and I called him and emailed him every day for a month. And so finally I went back up there. He never responded. Went back up, asked to see him again. He made me wait in the lobby well over an hour. And then finally he comes out and he's like, "I'm getting your messages. I'm not interested." I was like, "You don't understand. I'm working here." And, you know, he just was like, "You know what? Fine. I'll make you quit." He said, "But I'm not paying you." I was like, "Okay." You know, he's like, "Well, come back tomorrow night and we'll see what you got."
So just real quick.
Sure.
You had looked into culinary school.
Yes.
Were you not qualified? What were the requirements that they wanted for you to start that program?
They wanted you to sign on the dotted line for a big student loan. So they would have let anybody in.
What's culinary school at that time cost? You remember?
Probably about $20,000 a year.
Okay.
So more than I wanted to spend. And I'm not saying that that's not a good way to go. In some cases, it very much is. But I really wanted to go try to work in this kitchen and see what it was about before I really started spending money.
Now you were still doing the real estate stuff.
Yeah, still doing that.
So you had a means of making money for your family.
I did. Yeah, absolutely.
You browbeat the owner of the Italian restaurant to give you a preliminary job.
I did.
How'd that go?
It was interesting. You know, they
with someone with limited to little experience, what do you start out doing?
So the first day, I went to a uniform shop and bought like a $5 chef coat and a pair of pants and a pair of I had on a pair of Crocs. You know, so I mean,
the stereotypical chef's outfit.
Very stereotypical.
With the pants black and white checker?
No, they were all black.
Okay.
Yeah. So I showed up the next day and he put me with this guy named Andrea. And Andrea was this old crusty Italian guy from Sardinia, spoke broken English, mostly Italian. Most of everything that was, you know, the language spoken in the kitchen was Italian. And so we were making raviolis. That was our job that day, was to make raviolis. And, you know, we would make 800 to 1,200 raviolis a night. You know, I mean, this is a Italian fine dining restaurant. I mean, this big volume. And we made the pasta from scratch. We rolled it out. We let it rest. You know, all the filling, whether it was a cheese or a lobster or pork or ossobuco, whatever it was, everything was made from scratch. So we made the filling, we made the pasta, then, you know, we'd roll it out and, you know, and we made them all. And then, you know, once we got it crimped and cut and ready, it all went into the freezer. We froze it and then portioned it up. And so that was the day.
What kind of hours are you working for free?
I went in at 3 p.m. and got off at 11. During the dinner rush, they would start screaming at me in Italian.
Did you understand? You say you come from Italian family.
I do. So my family comes from Sicily, but I speak zero Italian. I know a couple of bad words. That's about it. So I had no idea what they were yelling at or telling me to go get.
You just knew they were yelling at you.
I knew they were telling me to go get something out of the walk-in. And so I could understand certain words or that are not, I couldn't translate the word, but I could hear them say, "Go get, you know, this." And so I would run in and I'm looking at all the labels and that doesn't exist. And so they were like he was telling me to go get Dragoncello. And so I looked at everything in the cooler and there was no Dragoncello. And I found out a couple hours later that they were asking me to go get tarragon, you know, so they didn't say tarragon because they knew it didn't say tarragon in the walk-in. I don't even know if they needed it. It didn't matter. They were just hazing me.
Oh, okay. So there was a method to their madness.
Oh yeah. They were trying to get me to quit. So the first day walked out, you know, had to get back up and go to work the next day and went back at 3. This time they put me on the line telling me I was making a dish called veal saltimbocca. And so he came over, he's like, "Here's how you make it. Bah, 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 bah. This is what it's supposed to taste like. It needs to taste like this and look like this every single time. When you hear them call this, you make this." And so I'd make it, and to me, it would taste the same. but I'd put it up in the window. He would taste it, throw it in the garbage, and tell me to start over. So that's the way it went all night.
How long did this go on for?
So for 3 days, this happened.
But I'm assuming you didn't quit.
I did not quit. So the third day I went in, I was making saltimbocca and veal piccata, and same thing happened. I mean, I made each dish for each table probably 4 or 5 times. Just constantly into the garbage, into the garbage, into the garbage. And I was pretty broken after the third day. And so I was walking out at the end of the night, and the chef was sitting at a table with his father and his fiance at the time. And he asked me to come sit down.
Not the owner of the restaurant, just one of the others.
No, it was the chef. His name is Mimo. And then his father, Gino, and then Mimo's fiance were sitting at a table, because at the end of the night, you would sit down and have dinner. And so he asked me to come over and sit down, and I sat down, and he's like, why are you doing this? And I was like, well, up until 3 days ago, I thought this is really what, really what I wanted to do. I said, but I'm kind of questioning it now. And I remember Mimo is the chef's name. He poured me a glass of wine, kind of a very symbolic Italian thing. And at that point I knew I was good. So I started doing, 5-6 days a week, from that point on.
Were you at least getting paid at this point?
No, I actually never got paid, from him, but the education I was getting was priceless. I was learning everything I needed to know in that kitchen that culinary school was going to teach me, but I was doing it for free. And
more probably real world.
More real world, so absolutely. Now, could I have gone on payroll? Yeah, absolutely. There was definitely that opportunity. But, I had a source of income, so I was okay. I still had a wife at the time. So, we were a dual income family. I just knew I had to work hard. And I've learned everything I could ever possibly. I mean, I was asking all kinds of questions, on Saturdays and Sundays when the prep crew would come in. I would go and work with the prep crew, because obviously you're doing different things. You're learning how to make things and get it ready for dinner service. So whether it was making breads, because we made breads fresh every day, or, pre-cooking the stocks, or whatever the case may be, all that was done in the morning, and all that's really important.
Was there ever a point where the shoes turned and he actually offered you a paying job?
We talked about it at one point. It was right about the time, I guess it was probably late 2011, maybe early 2012. At that point, I had gone through a divorce, and I actually had gotten custody of my children. And so my world was changing, and so there were some conversations about, hey, I'm going to be limited. I'm not going to be able to come up here and work from 3 until midnight, every night. And so we had some conversations, about what a future looks like. We actually sat down and planned a new restaurant together over a bottle of wine one night. And so we had talked about that, but at the time I was a new parent, or new single parent, and I was really longing to come back to the East Coast to be close to family.
So you're still not a paid employee, but yet he's having conversations with you about potentially opening a restaurant with you.
Well, yeah. So we sat down with a legal pad one night and drew out a concept for a new restaurant. And we were talking about what our roles would be, in that. So, he would have been the owner. I mean, he had the funds that I did not have, but I was going to play a pretty big role in it.
But the concept came from him or came from you?
It came from us together. Yeah.
And what kept that from coming to fruition?
I moved back to the East Coast.
Okay.
So, because in May of 2012, I moved back. So I needed family. I needed family bad at that point in time.
So the only restaurant that you worked in while you were in Vegas was the Italian restaurant?
That's it.
It was entirely as a free or gratis employee?
Absolutely. It's called staging, STODGE, stage. So that's when you volunteer your time to go get an education in a restaurant. So I'm going to come work for you, and you're going to get my labor, but you're going to give me the knowledge.
So that's a very common thing within the
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So did you ever end up revisiting culinary school?
I did. So when I came back to South Carolina, it's the first thing I did was sign up for culinary school. I've felt a lot more secure since I was around my parents. My ex-wife and I get along, and it wasn't a adversarial divorce. So, she came back to South Carolina. Her parents were there. My parents were there. So I felt a lot more, I had a lot more support to be able to go and pursue that. So
the culinary school process is how long?
It's normally 2 years.
Now, with your experience that you came to the table with, does that speed up the process?
It did. So I was able to do it in a year.
And going through that, are you working in a restaurant at culinary school, or is it in a more controlled environment? So
it's more of a controlled environment. So there are schools that have operating restaurants because it's really important to learn how to run a restaurant. It's probably more important to know how to run the management of a restaurant in terms of inventory, profits, cost, fixed cost, things like that. It's more important to know that than it is really to be able to cook a dish.
So culinary school is more teaching you to run a restaurant or operate a restaurant?
So usually if you break down culinary school into, let's say it's a bachelor's degree, so 4 years, the first 2 years are going to be how to make things. You're going to start off with safety and sanitation. You're going to go into knife cuts and learn how to use your knife. You're going to go through different classes. You're going to go through a class on sauces where all you do is make sauces. You're going to go through a vegetable class. You're going to go through a meat class, a seafood class. You go through one called garde-manger, which is making like salamis and things like that. You'll go through baking and pastry, chocolates, ice carving. I mean, you go through all these different classes to learn all these different things.
A chainsaw?
Yeah. I was terrible at it.
Why does that sound like a class that could go seriously wrong?
It's
hey, everybody, bring a chainsaw tomorrow.
Well, they provide it, but it's amazing what they can do. So I tried, and I was terrible at it. It's one of those things like, all right,
know your limitations and move on.
Yeah. So, so the first 2 years are really involved in that aspect of the business. When you move beyond that into, say, for a bachelor's program in year 3 and year 4, that's when you're really getting into the management and the profit, how to design a kitchen, how the workflow goes, how to make it profitable. Because that's obviously what the ultimate goal is, to be profitable.
Now, during this entire process, did you just focus on culinary school, or were you also working at a restaurant?
I was working part-time at a restaurant at the time, but I was focused on getting that year behind me.
So you get through culinary school, then what?
So I get through culinary school. I start working in a restaurant in Columbia. It's a kind of a catering place. And I started working on my bachelor's as well. So the experience plus that 1 year gave me my equivalent of an associate's, and I started working on the bachelor's as well.
Through the same culinary school?
No, that was actually through the New England Culinary Institute. So you're able, since year 3 and 4 are more management, food costing and things like that, you can actually do that virtually. So I was doing that virtually. One of the instructors in my year program actually hired me to work at his country club as well. So, I was doing, I was working, and making money. But my ultimate goal was to study and make myself as attractive in the workforce as possible. I mean, I was later in life. So, my goal wasn't to go in and be the dishwasher and work up to the fry cook, to work up to that wasn't my goal. My goal was to really get as educated as I could be, because I really wanted to go into the higher level jobs, that wasn't backbreaking.
So were you able to get all the way through the entire program, the full 4 year?
Yeah, absolutely. So,
and then where did that take you?
So that actually took me, ironically, it took me into the classroom. So it actually led me to the public school system in Columbia. They had a need for a culinary arts teacher. So I went in and interviewed with them, and ended up going in and getting the job as their high school culinary arts program. teaching. So I had the background. I may not have had the years of experience, but I had the knowledge to be able to go in and build a program for them.
Was that something you learned about through your culinary school, or just happenstance? I mean,
it was. So, I mean, in culinary school, you're not going to get taught how to
be a teacher.
I mean, that's really more about learning how to communicate. Communication was never really a big issue. So, whenever I went in and kind of guest taught, and the administration came in and watched, they were very pleased with it, at how I was taking whatever skill we were learning that day and breaking it down into very basic parts for a high school student, a sophomore, junior, or senior in high school, and breaking it down into the way they could understand it. And also, if there's multiple ways to teach, so this student over here learns visually, so we're going to give them a visual. This student over here learns by reading and watching a video, so we're going to give them that aspect. This student over here learns by hands-on. All right, well, that's fine. Let's put it in your hands and let's tinker with it. Let's find a way.
Now, when you came to culinary school, for no better term, your experience was cooking Italian food.
Correct.
You learned a lot of different aspects of preparing and making Italian food.
Correct.
But when a student actually enters culinary school, do they pick a particular aspect that they want to focus on, or?
No, you're learning everything.
So when somebody's a pastry chef, is that additional schooling?
So, pastry,
Did I open up that can of worms? They aren't really chefs.
No, they are. They are some of the most talented people around. I would say, so culinary school for, I'm going to use the term loosely, cooking, is a set of skills. Baking and pastry is a completely different set of skills. And those two brains work completely different. So, they typically don't match very well together.
Do I have a good grasp of it that a baker would be more of a scientist, and a chef or a cook would be more of a free spirit? Try this, try that.
Absolutely. So if I'm cooking a dish, let's use veal piccata, because that's just what I was talking about a minute ago. You can put the veal in the pan and start cooking it. You can add your capers, you can add your shallots, you can add your lemon juice, you can add your white wine, you add some salt, add some pepper. That's basically it, right? When you go to taste it, if it doesn't taste right, I can fix it. I can, hey, you know what? I want to add sage today, or hey, you know what? I want to add this today. It's all correct. There's no really wrong way to do it, as long as the meat is cooked properly. I mean, you're not going to hurt somebody. Baking and pastry is an exact science. There's a procedure that you have to follow, and you have to follow it to that procedure. And the ingredients are exact. You have to have a third of a cup of this, and it doesn't matter if it's loose packed, or it matters if it's packed or loose. Sometimes you have to sift the flour to spread it apart. Sometimes if you're making creme brulee, you have to temper the eggs, or else it turns into, kind of breaks apart and turns into like scrambled eggs, because you're heating the eggs up, but you don't want to heat them up too much. You don't want to cook them. You want to blend them. So it is very much an exact science. And if you're baking a cake, you don't know if the cake turned out until you're done, until it comes out of the oven. If it was supposed to rise and it didn't, you don't know until it comes out of the oven if it's right or not.
There's no way to adjust it on the fly.
There's no way to adjust it. You have to start from scratch. So it is very much a different thing. The bakers and chocolatiers and people that do that they fascinate me. My brain does not work that way.
So somebody comes into culinary school saying, I want to be a chef at a steakhouse. Mm-hmm. Just saying, I want to make steaks.
Sure.
They're still going to have to learn ice carving, and
they'll be exposed to it. So if you're going through culinary school to be a normal chef, you will you'll go through those classes and you'll spend a whole lot more time on meats and seafoods. If you're going to go a baking and pastry route, you'll do some of the initial classes, but then you'll take a completely different set of classes.
So you can somewhat specialize?
You can, absolutely.
So you're now teaching at the high school level.
Yeah. So the other thing that I did that is important. So there are, as with any organization, there are membership, professional, membership clubs or organizations and certifications you can get. And so as I was moving through all that and working in the country clubs and working those jobs, I was working my way through those things as well. So for the chef, it's called the American Culinary Federation, or the ACF. And I was working through and getting certifications with them as well. So really doing as much education and as much training as I could to make myself as attractive as I could in the workforce.
At that point in time, what are you aiming for? What's your end goal?
My goal at that point was to become a certified executive chef. So that was kind of it's the second to highest level of chef certification you can get. So there's a certified master chef, which I think there's 200 in the world. So that was never really a goal of mine.
What's the difference in the two?
The amount of things you can do and the amount of experience that you have, just a level of mastery. The certified executive chef, is able to run facilities, and whether it's all encompassing of a restaurant. So you're able to manage and food costs and be profitable, train, make sure all the products are right, make sure everything's done correctly. The master chef would be like a PhD, kind of level.
And is it a component of formal education and real world experience?
It is.
You must have both?
Absolutely.
And what's the process time wise? What are you looking at for something like that?
If you grind through it, there's steps as with anything. If you grind through it, you can do it in probably 2 years. There's classes you have to take. There's additional education you have to take. Then there's, years of experience in the workforce, and then there is a practical cooking exam that you have to go through, where you have a set of things that you have to demonstrate. So there's 4 dishes that you have to make, and in each dish you have to do certain things. So you have to demonstrate. I'm going off my memory. So I think there's 4 different knife cuts, that you have to do, and you have to do correctly. You have a list of ingredients that you have to do. You have to break down a chicken. You have to cook with a lobster, a fish, a composed salad. You have to make a dressing of some form. And then they have a list of ingredients that you have to incorporate in. So you have to create these dishes and incorporate all of those techniques, all of those skills, and then present that to this panel of chefs, that are graders. And then they judge and all of your preparation and everything that you did to get to that point, as well as the dishes, and then they decide if you're worthy or not.
Is this a regional? What I mean by regional, so if you live in an area where you're not exposed to this, do you have to go to this testing place to do your presentation? Yeah,
so there's, the tests are held all over the country. I did mine in Charleston. But they will have them regionally. So you may have to travel to Atlanta or Vegas or San Diego or Austin.
So they're all over the country.
They are. Yeah.
Okay.
So, it's definitely nationwide.
So now you get done with that certification.
And that's, I did that right as I was going into the teaching. So that was kind of happened at the same time.
Was the teaching something that you were thinking was going to be a long-term thing for you?
When I first went into it, it was, I enjoyed teaching. I enjoyed it a lot. Pay wasn't that great, but the hours were amazing. I went to work at 8 and got off at 3 every day. And I was working in this amazing kitchen, that had the state of the art equipment. And, the director of this, the school district, there were 4 high schools in this district, and they all kind of fed into one career and technology center that was brand new. I think it was 2 years old at the time, state of the art. And so the director of that program gave me free reign to do the program however I wanted. You know, he said he wanted it to be he said he wanted us to be the best, and he wanted me to build a program that other schools wanted to come and mimic. And, you know, for the next 2 years, that's what I did. You know, you know, asked him to spend some money to get some additional equipment in, which he did happily. And we started a catering program, where the kids were doing meals, and we started off doing these breakfast buffets, you know, and then we moved to where we were doing plated, you know, dinners. And then by the end of it, we were doing, you know, 3, 4, 5 courses, you know, fine dining, and the students were doing it all.
That'd be pretty rewarding.
And it was amazing. So we were doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and the students were really learning, how to plan, execute, and be at least theoretically profitable, and make money, you know. And that was, you know, the kids that came in had, some of them just wanted to come in and eat, which is fine. You know, but the idea was, you're interested in going into the restaurant business. I think everybody's heard of the saying that 80% of all restaurants fail in the first year. Well, let's stop that. You know, let's find a way, and let's learn how to take, okay, I have a customer that wants this. How do we turn that into, we've done what they've asked for, we've given them a good quality product, but we've done it profitably, and that's ultimately the goal.
What's the usual or the common factor that causes restaurants to fail in that first year?
Management. 100% management.
So just not understanding how to run a business properly.
Absolutely. Not understanding food costs, not understanding all the different things that go into it, not understanding how to put out a product that the public wants. I think a lot of places will go in and they want, you know, I like spaghetti, so I'm going to do a restaurant around spaghetti. Well, it doesn't matter what you want. What do the customers want? You know, is the restaurant right for the area that you want to put a restaurant? You know, if you want to do a burger restaurant, that's fine. I love a hamburger, but you have to put that in the right place.
Not across the street from another burger joint.
Probably, maybe not. Depends. You know, but if you're wanting to do, let's say fish tacos, you know, that's one of my favorite things in the world. I love fish tacos. If you want to do a fish taco restaurant, you need to put it in a place where the people will, you know, the community around wants it, where there's a need. You don't want to put it where there's 15 other fish taco restaurants. You may not want to put it in the middle of, say, Oklahoma, where people, for the most part, eat, you know, steak and potatoes kind of thing. I mean, so you have to, if you're going to take a concept, you have to find the right place for it. Or if you're starting with the place, you have to find what that place needs, you know.
So it's not just learning to cook and prepare the food properly.
That's the smallest part.
It's all of the ancillary stuff.
Absolutely.
So 2 years teaching.
2 years teaching. What
drew you away from that?
So, I got a call from the food distributor, Cisco Foods called, and I was actually on summer break. So I mean, teaching was the most amazing job. I mean, I had all summer off, and my food rep called me up one day and said, "Would you be interested in teaching? I mean, would you be interested in coming to work for us and selling food?" And so in my personal life, I had gotten to the point where I was stable. You know, I'd gotten beyond divorce. I'd gotten beyond learning how to be a single dad with custody of 2 young children and working out schedules. And, you know, I'd figured all that out. And so they threw money at me, and still had freedom to go and do, and, you know, still pick up my kids from school if I want to, but it's just kind of a different challenge.
Because I would imagine with the school teaching job, when you're talking about from a parent's perspective and also raising children, that locked in set schedule that almost mirrors your children, I would imagine.
It did.
Had to be very beneficial, very hard to walk away from.
It was hard to walk away from. I loved the kids. I mean, I'm still in touch with some of my students today. You're right. I mean, the hours were the same. The days off were the same. You know, with spring break, I was off. They were off. It was all the same. But I was also maxed out. You know, I'd been there for 2 years.
You hit your ceiling,
and I was done. And there was really no place else for me to grow and do anything else.
So the transition to Cisco, that's not a restaurant.
It's not. It's a food distributor. So I went from in the kitchen to being a food rep and selling food.
And what does that entail? I mean, it's a traditional sales job. It's, you know, I go around and open accounts and, you know, help restaurants hopefully be profitable and answer questions, and I sell them food. And, you know, if I'm building a territory, then I'm going around and trying to open accounts and getting people to buy from us and finding out what they need and trying to find it. And, you know, once I open an account, then it's continuing to communicate with that customer and, you know, where are your challenges. You know, we can analyze your menu to see, what's the most profitable? What are you making money off of? What are you not making money off of? If you're not making money off of it, then we need to get it off your menu and replace it with something that you can. Especially right now with everything that's been going on over the past 2 years, you know, the supply chain is terrible. You know, we're here in Myrtle Beach, you know, the seafood capital of the world, or the fried seafood capital of the world. You know, it's very hard to find enough flounder and, you know, all those different things that, you know, that these restaurants want. So trying to find those products and book those products for them so their costs are stable. So they know if they can offer a product and make money with the product. And, so we do. That's most of what my day is. This may sound like a rhetorical question.
Mm-hmm.
Is your knowledge of having worked in a restaurant, having knowledge of being a chef, what Cisco was looking for, or is that just an ancillary benefit? No,
it was. I mean, it's you know, the food salesmen, I think going back 15, 20 years ago, probably were held in the same regard as a used car salesman. And I don't mean that derogatory, but you know, it's just, I'm going to tell you what you want to hear. And, you know, I want to sell. The distribution companies have really gotten into where it's less about me coming in with a sales pitch and more about me coming in as a consultant. You know, I'm here to help your business. And here's why I'm here to help your business, because I know how to do this, this, and this. It's more about how to be profitable than about this can of corn. Everybody has the can of corn, you know, everybody has it. But if I can come in and show you how to get your food costs from a 38% to a 31%, then I'll just put 7% in your pocket as profit. And that's huge. At that point, it doesn't matter what the can of corn cost.
Was that a dedicated culture shift within, and I'll keep referring to Cisco, but within the food distribution industry to provide more of a consultation service?
It was. It was definitely a for all the companies. So whether it's Cisco, U.S. Foods, I don't work for Cisco anymore. I work for a company called Cheney Brothers. We're a regional just in the Southeast, but you know, there's PFG, there's a produce company, Fresh Point. I mean, there's dozens of different companies, but most of them have gone that way. And that transition's probably happened over the past 5 to 10 years, really. And and in many cases, especially with the big publicly traded companies, are actually transitioning more beyond that. You know, where they transition from the used car salesman to the consultant, and they're actually kind of moving away from that and moving on to the Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Amazon kind of model of doing business. They're actually moving beyond that in many cases.
So for somebody looking to go down a career path, is it a feasible option now? I'm going to go to culinary school. I'm going to learn everything about being a chef and running a business, but going straight into just being a consultant.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I know that part of this is, transitioning out of law enforcement or military. So first of all, I'm a backup culinary school. If you have the means, I think culinary school is a great school to go to. You learn a lot. Do you have to spend the kind of money that those schools used to charge? No, absolutely not. So, and I don't know how it is around the in other parts of the country, but here in South Carolina, we have technical schools. So for every region of the state, there's a kind of a group of technical schools. In the Midlands, it's Midlands Tech. On the coast, it's in Myrtle Beach, it's Horry Georgetown Tech. In Charleston, it's whatever it's called. So each one of those technical schools has a culinary program. It's a 2-year program, which is probably all you need in reality. But you can go and get a 2-year associate's degree at Horry Georgetown Tech here in their $17 million state-of-the-art facility that they just built. It's phenomenal. And with the grants that the state offers, out of pocket, you're like $5,000. I mean, all in. It's incredible. So remarkable education.
With culinary school, is it like when somebody talks about being a lawyer, mm-hmm. and they, I have my degree from Harvard Law as opposed to Middle America Law School. Mm-hmm. Is there a notoriety with culinary schools which is going to get you better opportunities, or is culinary school culinary school? Culinary school is culinary school.
There are certain schools. So the entry level, what 90% of job seekers are looking for is basic knowledge. And from those technical schools, you're going to get that. One level up, kind of the almost entry level, into, I guess the next level up in terms of, notoriety would be Johnson and Wales. Very, very good school, expensive school, But
when you say expensive, what's expensive?
I think Johnson and Wales is $45,000 a year
for a 2-year degree.
That's per year. Per year.
Wow.
I think. And then the cream of the crop, the best there is in the United States is a cool school called the Culinary Institute of America, the CIA. And I think the CIA's $80,000 or $90,000 a year. It's remarkable.
But when you come out of a program like that, are they doing guaranteed job placement?
I don't think so. I'm sure they get picked up, but it's, the Johnson and Wales, are going to, they're going to give you, are they going to give you more? Yeah, they're going to give you a little bit more. But they're going to give you a little bit more on the management side. Making sauces is sauces. Grilling steaks is grilling steaks. Are you going to have a little bit more time in that class? Probably. But grilling steaks is grilling steaks, right? Roasting is roasting, sauteing is sauteing, baking is baking. I would tend to say for somebody wanting to transition, that's probably not the way you want to go. I'm not so sure that the amount of money that you invest is worth the return. Are you going to make a whole lot more money coming out? No, probably not.
Is there a specific goal or path where you would recommend somebody going to a Johnson and Wales or a CIA?
Going to the CIA, probably not. Johnson and Wales is a great school. The closest one is in Charlotte. If you're wanting to go work for a company like Sodexo, or Aramark, or one of these large national corporations that hire chefs, and they do colleges and universities. They do like all of your ballparks, your professional football stadiums and baseball stadiums. They put chefs in corporate, type of environments, corporate, there's office buildings in Washington or Chicago or Charlotte where they have a kitchen, that their executives go and eat at, so if you're looking at that type of thing, that would be a good place to go. They have a really good, alumni support as well within that community. I think, I think the job market is so diverse when it comes to food and beverage that you can go and do pretty much anything you want. And the great thing about it is that labor is so bad, you can, that any way you want to go with it, there's going to be job opportunities and there's going to be openings, and you may not walk in as the head guy, but people, these companies want to hire and build. I mean, they're craving for it.
Well, and just for me right now, as from the periphery looking in, the whole idea of being a consultant in the restaurant industry, something that I never even considered.
Well, and so there's so many different avenues. So let's start with safety and sanitation. So through the National Restaurant Association, there's a program called Serve Safe that most restaurants and most health departments require that the employees have this class. So, you could go and,
do they call that the Chipotle rule?
It didn't hurt, but so for example, Chick-fil-A, right? Chick-fil-A has regional people that all they do is go around. They're Serve Safe experts. They're experts in knowing what the health and standards are for that restaurant chain. And it doesn't matter if this is Outback, Chick-fil-A, McDonald's, they all have this. And so all they do is go around and visit these restaurants, within their company, and inspect them for safety and sanitation issues. There are, on the news, what I think usually once a week, if you watch the news, the news always does a health department. I'm sure they have it on the West Coast too. They do here. Once a week they'll come in and they'll say who made good scores on the health department and who made bad scores. Well, there's always 2 or 3 good ones and like 5 bad ones. It just happens. Well, those bad ones, if you're going to do like health and sanitation type of consulting work, that's your list of customers. As soon as they're on the news, that's who I'd be in there the next day. Hello, Mr. So-and-so, you got a bad score. Here's what I do. I train your staff. I come in and do spot inspections. We do a monthly or quarterly, in-depth, inspection. I'm keeping track of your pest control. I'm keeping track of all of these things for you, to make sure that you don't have this 75 on your health score again. Because if you don't think that will push business away,
right?
Ask Chipotle.
So now for you,
mm-hmm.
Well, let me go backwards a little bit. You've mentioned that you're no longer with Cisco.
Correct.
So are you still in the consulting role, or are you, I guess what I'm getting at is going back to your story of the guy who was browbeating the owner of the Italian restaurant.
Sure.
I want to learn, I want to work as a chef in your restaurant, to being a consultant. Are you no longer cooking?
No, I don't cook anymore, professionally. I cook at home, but, I'm most of what I do at this point is consult with restaurants, and I'm still a salesman, but, I talk food and, how to be profitable more than I talk about anything else. So this morning, before I came over here, I'm on the phone and visiting several customers, trying to make sure that their menu remains profitable, especially right now, because the products that are coming in, we just don't know how long. So we're, okay, for the next 60 days, I have these things booked for you at this price. So, if you do these dishes, you're going to make this return. So, but that's only good for 60 days. Once that 60 days go by, we need to go ahead and start looking at what's going to be next. So making sure these restaurants stay profitable. It was just announced, I got a letter. So today's the 14th, right? On the 13th. So yesterday there was an announcement from the crab leg, one of the crab leg, that one of the red king crab fisheries is not opening this year. And the Bering Sea snow crab fishery, their quota has been dropped 55%. Right. So what do you think that's going to do to crab leg prices? Skyrocket. And they're already 40, 50% high.
Is this something that happens on a regular basis within the food industry?
Not to the extreme that we have. So, so once that letter comes out and we see that, yesterday was on the phone with, you right up and down, anybody that's buying crab legs, you're on the phone with them going, hey, this just came out. We either need to find what we can find and book it right this second, or we need to start looking at different options. And a lot of times that ends up being different options. So, it's that type of service that you're going back and forth with the owners, because they either don't keep up with it or they depend on you to keep up with those things. But imagine the seafood buffet, the crab leg buffet right down that goes through, 500,000 or 600,000 pounds of crab legs during a summer season. Imagine their price going up, another 50%. They'd be out of business.
So using the restaurant model, I can see from your standpoint, when you're talking about providing for your family, stable income, the ups and downs of running a restaurant, being a consultant for a company allows you to stay, per se, in the restaurant industry, but not having the stress of your own restaurant or keeping a restaurant running. But I keep going back to this because I love that story of, you walked into this guy's restaurant and said, I want to work here. I want to work for you. Is that piece of you still being fulfilled? Do you still have the desire to be back in a restaurant cooking?
It does. Being on a production line is kind of like being a rookie patrol officer, or the Marine grunt. Your body can only do it so long. There just comes a time when your body you just can't take that abuse. You can't be on your feet for 14 hours a day. Your body just can't do it. And that's a hard pill. I think it is for anybody. But so do I have the desire to go be on a cooking line anymore? No, not really. My body can't do that anymore. But I still get very fulfilled, because I'm still talking food, which is what I'm super passionate about. And I'm still able to try things, and I'm still able to get products and take them in and sample them to customers. And I'll get, boxes of food sent to me, and we'll go in and sit down, and I can cook a dish 4 or 5 dishes for a customer for us to try and go, hey, here's what I think you should do. You came to me and said, I need this, this, or this. Okay, here's a couple options. Here's product. Here's how you're going to do it. Here's the specs for it. Here's what it's going to cost you per plate. Here's what I think you can sell it for. This is your profit. So if you're making $5 a plate or $7 a plate or whatever the case may be, it doesn't matter. Here's what I think you can do. So I still get that, but not with the body abuse that working on a line. It's a young man's game.
Or the time away from your family.
Or the time away from the family, which is, time away from my family is not acceptable, to me anymore. I've done that. My kids are older, I've got a 16-year-old and a 13-year-old now. But it's more important for me to be present with them. And this allows me to be present. And that's super important.
So you think in a couple of years when they're adults, you revisit that restaurant idea, but maybe out here on the East Coast?
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know. I like, and I think, I mean, if you look at my story, you see evolution. I'm constantly, my kids and my parents kind of make fun of me sometimes because I kind of set goals, and when I achieve them, I'm like, all right, I'm done with that. Let's move on to something else. But I see it as evolving. We're constantly evolving and using the knowledge that we've gained to move on to the next set of challenges or the next opportunity or whatever the case may be. I like what I do right now. I mean, it's very fulfilling for me, and I make a good living. For me, the freedom to be dad is the most important. And as long as I have a cell phone and a laptop and an internet connection, I can work. So if my son plays travel baseball, that
doesn't keep you busy at all.
None. This past weekend we were at a tournament, and it's Sunday, so we're taking orders for Monday delivery. And I'm sitting in the stands watching him play because I'm supporting him, and I've got my AirPods in my ear, my laptop in my lap, and I tell people I'm a dad first. When you call, there's no telling where I'll be. You may hear people cheering in the background, and customers are still people. They have families. They get it. And I think it almost bonds you a little bit more to them because they understand, and I think they appreciate the fact that, my priorities are family. My family's most important, and I'll be there for you. But, you may hear my kids scream in the background. It's just one of those things.
You hit on a good point, though, of the fact of setting goals, and then when you get there, what's my next challenge?
Absolutely.
As opposed to, I've achieved this goal, now I'm just going to grind it out. And I really believe that is almost a negative byproduct of the law enforcement and military careers, because so many of us get into those jobs,
mm-hmm.
and the pressure of just staying put overrides the desire of doing something different.
Yeah.
And what I've learned through this process is people outside of those jobs change jobs frequently. Mm-hmm. And they don't have, it's not a fear or apprehension. It's the acceptance of, hey, you're doing this today, but you want to do something tomorrow?
Yeah.
Go chase it.
Yeah. I think my old partner telling me a long time ago, hey, don't end up like me. Somewhere in the back of my head really sticks out. I think there's definitely a negative connotation to somebody who's changing jobs every month, but I think it also depends on why they're changing. If I'm a big supporter of anybody who wants to follow their dreams. And it's also okay if you go and try something and realize, quickly on, hey, what, this isn't what I thought it was, or what, I thought this was going to be okay. I don't like this at all. I need to go, I need to get out of this. Life's too short to be miserable. I agree with you. I think in law enforcement, and I know friends of mine that are still in law enforcement. One of the guys you're going to meet today, they see themselves and they feel stuck and they don't see a way out, and that's going to be a miserable place, and there's so many different opportunities in the world, that whether it's culinary or, insurance or whatever, it doesn't matter. There's so many other places that you can go and do and be just as fulfilled and just as happy, or if not happier, and live a great life. From a food standpoint, whether you're doing safety and sanitation, or you open a restaurant, or, I was actually working for a while. I wanted to go work in a assisted living facility. Assisted living facilities have great hours. Dinner service is done by 7, in your home. So it's breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's a captive audience. They live there. Our population is growing older. The number of people that will enter an assisted living facility, and I don't necessarily, that's not just nursing home. I mean, they could be independent living, but part of a community. I mean, that number is supposed to, I think, double or quadruple over the next 10 or 15 years. So that opportunity is enormous. Or country clubs, or I think it would be cool to do food in like a baseball stadium or a football stadium, or, you know.
I don't want to make light of it, but when you're talking about assisted living, what does everybody talk about when they assisted living hospital? They think of how horrible the food is. Could you imagine if you went into an assisted living facility and changed the quality of the food there to the point where people were actually like, hey, you need to go.
It's funny. There's a guy that I know, there's a facility in Columbia called Still Hopes, and the chef there, his name is Andy Marchant, and Andy was the chef for the governor a while. He won all these culinary awards. I mean, he's a culinary genius and just the most humble, quiet guy. I mean, he's just the greatest guy. And he went into Still Hopes and completely changed their food. And they have the most, I mean, they buy top of the line food. Now, are there aspects of that, of some of those residents' diets that are filler, you know,
limitations
bland,
on what they're allowed to eat?
Absolutely. But there are also residents in that community that eat prime rib and prime steaks. And I mean, the biggest lobsters and the best, I mean, they're there to pay for that. You know, the population that is moving into retirement are some of the wealthiest people, you know, that have ever lived in this country. They have money.
It's merely just their age is the only reason.
Only thing is and you know, and they want to go live around people their age, you know, and they like having communities where they can have food delivered, or they can go and be a part of those social aspects. But I mean, whether there's so many national, and assisted living may not even be the right term. So there's independent living, there's assisted living. So, I mean, there's different levels of care, but I mean, like Brookdale is this national, I mean, they own hundreds of facilities all over the country. I mean, they're bringing in sommeliers that are on staff. I mean, they've got these enormous wine rooms, you know, where you can store your own wine, or they're bringing in wine that you can have for dinner. So, I mean, they're treating it like a 5-star white tablecloth dinner every single night, because that's what the residents want. So, you know, the nurse, I mean, the hospital food that you're like, oh my God, this is disgusting. You know, sure, there's probably some of that around, but there's also a need for that. You know, there's definitely a need for that, but you can have the highest quality and still be within that style of business, and still do some of the best food that the country's seen.
I'm sure a lot of those places, they're working on the rebranding of their.
Oh yeah.
Because I think all of us, when you say assisted living, senior living, you think nursing home.
Of course.
And that's I'm sure a lot of those facilities are making active efforts
Absolutely.
to move away from that stereotype.
Absolutely. Colleges and universities are the exact same way. So I mentioned there's Compass, there's Aramark, Sodexo, are these humongous companies, you know, and they contract with hospitals and universities to do their food. But the demand, the expectations for food within colleges and universities has expanded and gotten so high that you're required to do these really higher quality foods. One of the things that it just kind of hit me, one of the things that really interests me, I'm a Clemson fan, just family and just who we are. But so the Clemson football program, they have chefs and nutritionists and dietitians on staff that plan the meals for all of the athletes. And so depending on whether they're trying to grow, whether they're trying to maintain their weight, whether they're trying to put on weight, what type they're trying to just put on sheer size or just muscle, or depending on the type of year, those chefs and nutritionists and dietitians are planning those meals for those athletes 3, 4, 5, 6 meals a day. So where they're getting each one has a certain shake that they're going to drink before they go work out, and a certain shake that they're going to drink when they come out of a workout. And it could be different for all the athletes, depending on what they personally need. So there's so many different ways that you can go into that culinary scene and do some of the most amazing things that I don't really even understand. I don't know how they do that, but I'd love to know. That would be fascinating to me.
So in wrapping this up, somebody's thinking about making their transition out. They have that interest in the culinary world. Do you recommend the staging route?
I think it depends on what their interest is. You know, is their interest nutrition? You know, is their interest dietitian? Is their interest colleges, or is it interest in, you know, maybe starting a restaurant? If they're really more interested in the restaurant aspect or being a chef at a facility or a place, then going and staging somewhere, and it doesn't have to be for a year. I mean, it could be for a week. It could be short period. But doing that stage is going to give you that real world. I don't really have a whole lot invested in this other than, you know, maybe a little bit of time. And you can see, yeah, this is for me. No, it's not.
Get a legitimate idea of what goes on behind the scenes.
When I staged, I went in and it set me on fire. You know, I mean, it was, I got to do this other thing to make money, but this is where I'm going. And then once I got into that, I just kind of evolved into where I am now. But I would say staging is a great opportunity to kind of see behind the curtain a little bit, but also do some research on, you know, don't be afraid to call up a dietitian or a nutritionist or a chef, or stop into a college or a university or a senior living facility or any of those places and have a conversation. People love to have conversations. They love to talk. You know, do a little bit of research and see what interests you, and then kind of start exploring. You know, if there's an income requirement, or if you're willing to move or not willing to move. I mean, all of those things need to be played into, you know, taken into consideration. You know, if, you know, there are gyms who have dietitians on board. I know several years ago, there was an enormous shortage for dietitians, especially in the hospitals. There was one place in Greenville, I think, that was flying in a dietitian from somewhere in the Northwest or the Northeast. They were flying them in every other week because they needed it. So, you know, find out where the holes in the labor market are.
I'm sure when going back to that story of, you know, the Italian restaurant in Vegas, you would have probably never saw yourself, or maybe I'm assuming, being a consultant as opposed to a working chef.
No, at the time I was focused on, I was going to be a line cook.
But with hindsight being 2020, playing that, go back and redo it, would you have done anything differently to get to where you're at today? Or if somebody wanted to get to being a consultant aspect, is there really even the need to have real world or restaurant experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if there's definitely going to be steps. So if you want to get to a consultant standpoint, then you have to have the knowledge to be in the experience to be able to have the credibility to be able to say, hey, here's what you need to do. You know, so, you know, having those steps to be able to get there. So same thing with being a police officer. You know, you're not going to walk in and be an investigator, you know, and start investigating homicides. You know, you have to have those steps to get up to the point where you have the experience and the credibility to be able to do that job right. You know, so I mean, there's going to be some of that. So, but, you know, do you have to have a line experience to get into the culinary world? No, absolutely not. You know, there are other avenues that you can do. You know, if you're a wine guy, you know, you can go become a sommelier and never have cooked a dish in your life. If you want to be a dietitian, then you don't have to have cooking experience to be a dietitian and understand fats and sugars and, you know, and different proteins and how they interact with the body.
Cool. I appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
If anybody has any questions, can they reach out to you?
Absolutely. Yep.
What would be the best way to get in contact with you?
So probably on Instagram, probably a direct message on Instagram. I'm at Chef Jeff Urso. I'm also on Twitter at Chef Jeff Urso, URSO. So either one of those.
I'll put that in the image links.
Sure.
Not image links, episode links.
Yeah, absolutely.
But no, I appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
Thank you for taking your time to listen to the podcast. I truly hope you enjoyed it. Not only is the podcast available on audio platforms, but you can also watch it on YouTube at the Transition Drill Podcast channel. Please subscribe for future episodes. The best way you can help the show is by getting the word out. If you think somebody else might enjoy it, I would appreciate it if you would share it with them. Also, if you have the time, please go to Apple Podcast and leave me a rating. I welcome your feedback, both positive and negative. You can also go to the website, transitiondrillpodcast.com, and through the contact tab, send a message directly to my email with any comments or suggestions. Thank you again, and I hope you tune in for the next one.